Could religion have destroyed the Moche civilization? In the bone-dry coastal plains of northern Peru, dug out from under a massive monument of mud bricks called the Huaca de la Luna, archaeologists found them. The bodies of more than 40 men, splayed and broken. Their skeletons show clear signs of torture. Their throats had been slit, and they were left exposed to the elements, a grim offering in a place they held sacred. This was Moche human sacrifice. These brutal, bloody rituals were performed by the leaders of a powerful civilization to please their gods, to guarantee the rains would come, to ensure the harvest, and ultimately, to secure the survival of their people. But what if that devout faith, that unwavering belief in the power of blood and ritual, didn't actually save them? What if, when faced with an environmental crisis on an unimaginable scale, this deep commitment to sacrifice was the very thing that tore their world apart? What if the rituals meant to hold their society together were what ultimately fueled its collapse? The flourishing civilization, the Golden Age? To understand their fall, you first have to appreciate what the Moche actually built. For centuries, peaking between the 4th and 9th centuries AD, they weren't just surviving in one of the world's most arid landscapes, they were mastering it. While parts of Europe were dealing with the aftermath of Rome's collapse, the Moche were building a network of powerful related domains along the Peruvian coast. They were, without a doubt, master engineers. In a land defined by desert, they constructed vast, sophisticated networks of irrigation canals that diverted river water, transforming barren plains into fertile agricultural fields. This mastery of water is what allowed them to support a complex, stratified society. At the heart of their largest settlements stood two colossal structures, the Huaca del Sol and the Huaca de la Luna, the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon. These weren't built of stone, but of more than 130 million adobe bricks, making the Huaca del Sol the largest single adobe structure in the ancient Americas. These pyramids weren't just buildings, they were the center of Moche political and religious life, the stage where their power was put on display. And their art was on another level. They were unparalleled ceramicists, creating stunningly realistic pottery that serves as a window straight into their world. We see portraits of stern-faced leaders, scenes of daily life, and vivid, often graphic, depictions of their myths and rituals. Their metalworkers crafted exquisite jewelry from gold and silver. This was a civilization of immense skill and cultural richness. They were powerful, prosperous, and by all accounts, seemingly unshakable. But the world had other plans. The perfect storm, the environmental catastrophe. The Moche owed all of their success to their ability to control water. But in the 6th century, the climate turned on them with a vengeance. Ice core data from Andean glaciers reveals a period of catastrophic weather instability that would have shattered any society. It likely began with a super El Niño, a climatic disaster of epic proportions. For decades, torrential rains and massive floods hammered the coast. Just imagine the devastation. The very irrigation canals that were the lifeblood of their civilization were washed away. Their adobe pyramids, baked hard by the sun for generations, began to literally dissolve in the relentless downpours. Crops failed, leading to widespread famine. The remains of sacrificial victims from this time have been found embedded in thick layers of mud, proof that these rituals were being performed during the devastating floods. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the pattern abruptly flipped. The decades of rain were followed by decades of crippling drought. The rivers dried up, the fields turned to dust. The delicate balance the Moche had maintained for centuries was completely broken. This wasn't just a bad harvest or a difficult decade. It was a multi-generational crisis that struck at the very foundation of their world. It was a perfect storm, and it would push the Moche and their faith to the absolute breaking point. The escalating rituals, the religious response. So how does a civilization, whose leaders rule by divine right, respond to a crisis that the heavens themselves seem to have unleashed? For the Moche, power and religion were one and the same. The authority of the ruling elite, the warrior priests, was built on one simple promise, that through the right rituals they could communicate with the gods and ensure stability. And their most powerful tool in this cosmic negotiation was human sacrifice. Scenes on their pottery show elaborate ceremonies where costumed elites preside over the ritual killing of captives. These weren't random acts of violence, they were carefully staged spectacles designed to renew the world and reinforce the power of the leaders. The victims were often prisoners taken in battle with competing Moche groups, their blood offered up to appease deities like the fanged decapitator god, Ay Apayek. Faced with a decades-long environmental catastrophe that their religion couldn't explain, the Moche elite didn't question their faith. They doubled down. Archaeological evidence from sites like Huaca de la Luna shows a terrifying escalation. The number and frequency of human sacrifices appear to have shot up dramatically during this period. It was a desperate public display. The priests were trying to show their starving people that they still had the god's ear, that they were doing everything in their power to end the crisis. They offered more blood, more lives, in a frantic attempt to restore a balance that was already gone. But the rains didn't return to normal, the crops didn't grow, and the gods were silent. The seeds of rebellion, the social unrest. Try to imagine the mindset of an ordinary Moche farmer. You're starving, your family is sick, your fields are either a flooded mess or cracked earth, and you look to the Great Pyramids, where your leaders are performing more and more spectacular, more brutal sacrifices, but nothing changes. The floods don't stop, the drought gets worse. At what point does your faith in the ritual turn into fury at its failure? This is likely where the social fabric of the Moche began to unravel. The crisis of climate became a crisis of faith. The gods clearly weren't being appeased, which could only mean one of two things. Either the gods had abandoned the Moche, or their leaders had lost their divine connection. The social contract, where the people offered loyalty in exchange for security, was broken. Evidence for this social implosion is written in the ruins. In the later period, archaeologists find a sudden increase in fortifications and defensive walls. This points to a rise in social unrest and internal conflict. These weren't defenses against some foreign invader. There's little evidence of that. Instead, it seems the Moche began fighting each other. The very society once linked by a common culture fractured into factions, warring over the few resources that were left. The escalating sacrifices, meant to unite the people, may have instead just highlighted the powerlessness of the ruling class, fueling the anger that would lead to civil war and eventually collapse. The story of the Moche is a gripping reminder of how fragile even the most advanced civilizations can be. If you find these ancient mysteries as fascinating as we do, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation into the ghosts of history. The collapse, the final act. The end of the Moche civilization wasn't a single event, but a slow, agonizing disintegration. The final act was a tragedy with multiple authors. The environment delivered the first, devastating blow. But it was the rigid religious and political system that couldn't adapt. The leadership's response, ramping up a practice of brutal sacrifice, failed to fix the crisis and likely turned a desperate population against them. The great ceremonial centers like Huaca de la Luna were abandoned, the society fractured, its people scattered, and its unique cultural identity eventually faded, absorbed by successor cultures like the Chimu. The Moche didn't just vanish. Their complex world fell apart from the inside out, the lingering enigma. The fall of the Moche offers a stark and powerful lesson. It shows how a belief system that binds a society together in good times can become the very thing that destroys it when faced with a crisis it can't solve. The rituals that once confirmed the power of the Moche elite became a public spectacle of their failure, likely paving the way for rebellion and ruin. It leaves us with an unsettling question that echoes through history. How thin is the line between faith that provides strength and fanaticism that leads to self-destruction? The silent, sand-covered ruins of the Moche stand as a timeless warning about the dangerous relationship between power, belief, and the survival of a civilization in a changing world.